David, we have 3 shows, all ostensibly geared to the same target market.
Yeah.
Sabrina, the teenage witch, sex education, and the Dairy Girls. The action takes place around 3 daylight high schools and 1 darker high school, the Academy for the Unseen Arts. But for me, they're not all equally high school series, high school stories. Do you have a particular take on that?
Yes. The dark high school you refer to, the School of the Unseen Arts in Sabrina, is so much more attractive than the nightmarish, truly nightmarish school cliches of sex education and the daytime school of Sabrina, and with hints of the unpleasantness of all schooling in the Northern Irish school as well. What we learn from each one of those 3 schools is that cliches are true, because all schooling for most people is horrible, and some people stultifying, but always horrible because mostly negative, mostly unpleasant, concatenations of people you would never want to spend 5 minutes with, from staff to fellow pupils, except at the Unseen Arts, which, however, is a lot more terrifying because you never ever know what's going to happen, because there's a true supernatural dimension, and by supernatural meaning beyond what is natural, and that as a result there's nothing predictable except the possibility that good or evil may happen without any warning. Thrilling. Very good for the imagination, particularly if you are a Nietzschean teenager.
I want to just stay with the idea of the 3 high schools and how I rate the 3 series personally. And I think you've indicated more or less where my particular choice lies. It's a bit like the 3 bears, it's the porridge. So the porridge that for me is the most one-dimensional, the most bland, it's got no brand, it's got no unexpected, it's got cutesy bits and pieces, is sex education. The porridge is a little bit more substantial, and only because it has a fairly interesting context, and that is the Dairy Girls. I think it becomes a little bit more interesting because it's set in a particular political context, and it's well done. So it's set in the Northern Ireland of the early 1990s, the Troubles. I think that really gives it some heft. But by far, the most perfect bowl of porridge. It's not too bland, it's not too overwrought, is the Sabrina. And precisely because you have 2 dimensions. Literally, you have 2 dimensions. But there's a great deal more complexity. And I think you indicated that in terms of something of the ambivalence of what might be seen as clearly black-white, good, bad.
Yes. The unambiguously most awful school is in sex education. And why it is awful is that it has been artlessly constructed from cliches. The school doesn't exist, neither do the pupils, neither does the staff, neither does the country by the looks of it, or the weather. Everything is a construct, but the school itself is a terrifyingly inept amalgam of cliches, mostly American. Yet puzzlingly, it's supposed to be in Britain. It's a Britain where the sun shines. It's a Britain where domestic architecture is varied and singular and so attractive. It's a Britain where all the children are actually adults.
Nearing 30.
Yeah, one of them is 31, yeah. No, yes, so where all the children are strangely well-formed physically, and because of the script, ill-formed emotionally and otherwise. The sex education series is unbelievably horrible. It is so horrible because flipping across the top like a finger being dragged, like an unwashed finger being dragged through icing on a chocolate cake, is this sort of grown-up idea that it's about sex. And what confirms that it's about sex is that you see young adults, 20 to 30 years old, having sex on camera. They fling themselves about, they speak sexually to each other, and it's so indescribably thrilling. And to give it a further patina of verisimilitude and importance and grown-uppedness, the conductor of this whole disgusting show is a sex therapist. And there is nothing more noble than a sex therapist whose only desire is to bring goodness and happiness to the oppressed and suppressed masses, usually by example.
And stuck somewhere in Wales, where this was shot, in this completely inauthentic location. It was clearly aimed at an American audience, which the Dairy Girls is not, surprisingly.
You know the error they make, the directorial and theatre arts error, above all else, that sex education makes is that it's not a drawn cartoon. It was a terrible error to film it, to shoot it photographically, because nothing is real. And I don't mean unreal in an exciting way. I mean it's just a cliche-ridden construct. It's like a Marvel comic.
What did you? I thought Dairy Girls was. I found it a little bit more engaging, but not compelling enough to want another season. Albeit that, as with sex education, we appear to be out on a limb, because both Sex Education and the Dairy Girls have got extraordinarily good reviews, to the extent that I think it was The Guardian rating their top 20, or maybe even their top 10 television series for last year, placed Killing Eve as 1, Bodyguard as 2, and the Dairy Girls as 6, and raved about it. And there's a second season being shot, and as comparably Sex Education.
Look, I liked parts of the Dairy Girls. I liked it because of its incongruity. It's supposed to be the island of the troubles. The only trouble we see is a bit of menace of very old men in bowler hats rocking a motor car #1 and plain, expressionless British soldiers walking by with their assault rifles at the port arms. That's what you see. But what you get there is the impression of loathing for the English by the Irish nationalist Catholic families. And then you get the dynamic in the household itself. It's a three-generational household where far too many people are living in it, where there are these appalling cross-currents of dislike and loathing, which continue all the time, and bullying. Those two dynamics were working pretty well for me. But they then superimposed upon Enid, the famous fiver, wearing a bra.
Well
and
put.
you can see the bra straps.
Yes.
And they are sexually enthusiastic, and they're very vibrant. The accents are impenetrable to South Africans, but I struggled, being something of a lip reader. But joking apart, they gave it an authenticity. They sure as hell didn't sound like my idea of British, but then Ireland isn't Britain.
No.
That's one of the Atlantic Isles. And the awkwardness of all three is that every teenager is well over 20. They're all grown-ups. And not only are they grown-ups in Ireland, but they're wearing such manifestly false hair. There is one hair extension after another. They're one step away from being Neolithic woman. Kadisi's hair is more authentic.
And I think, again, looking at Sex Education and the Dairy Girls, there are crossover figures. I mean, you could actually match them. There's Meave, and there is the wild girl in the dairy, the one who's always breaking the rules. You can... So again, the stereotypical, which are in some ways true, but the stereotypes are there, played out. And I think, albeit that in Sabrina, in the high school, in the Baxter School environment, I don't think any of those characters are particularly interesting. The least interesting, of course, is poor old Harvey. He might as well be a cardboard cutout. Actually, would have been more interesting.
Well, he's half a person. That's why they call him Harvey.
Yes. And Susie and...
the bewitched dark girl.
Yes. Are obviously playing out the gender issues and has she got second sight, a la her grandmother. But they're not particularly interesting. They're pretty limited. But where Sabrina wins for me, hands down, is precisely that other dimension in which interesting questions are explored, certainly in terms of Sabrina's own development, the relationship between and the tension between her need for freedom and her desire for power, which I think are going to be developed in a very interesting way in season 2, because we end, or is it, yeah, season 2, because we end season 1 with Sabrina having signed her name in the Book of the Dead, or the
Book of Darkness. Devil's Bum.
But before that, there's a real tension between those two big issues. And I like the way they're explored. There are 2 other people, Miss Wardell and Prudence, who's very interesting face, wonderful hair, who know that you can't have both. And remember Prudence's conversation with Sabrina when they're talking about this. She says, no, that's not possible because you're a girl and the Dark Lord is a man. So I think that both Sex Education and the Dairy Girls might as well stop after season 1. There's no need for any further seasons. But Sabrina has a lot of potential for development in an interesting way.
You've read the Harkness novels.
Yes.
Well, Sabrina has something in common with the Harkness novels in that both of them begin to trigger the feeling within one, as a reader or as a viewer, that what you're seeing is the display of a craft which is there, which has its rules, which has its modes of existence, has its laws, has an alternative reality which doesn't come from eating a mushroom or smoking a joint. It's a reformulation of it. Is a concretization of the unorthodox, which is then made orthodox because it's as authoritarian as all hell.
Yes.
But the parameters are so different. You can live forever.
Yes.
Subject to certain constraints.
Yes. And you can bash your sister unto death, and then she can dig her way out of the grave and come stumbling back.
Having been flayed, you might remember.
Yes.
She's been skinned.
Yes. And bears no ill will to her older sister. She of the marvellous cigarette holder and superb sunglasses.
Yes. And the other thing, of course, and to actually leave the Harkness reference for a moment, which is definitely a different level from Sabrina. What Sabrina introduces one to is the concept of the grimoire, which is a recipe book of spells. Suddenly you realize that there's a literature, or an owner's manual, if insist, which grants access to powers. Then there's the extraordinary presence of the unseen. The unseen is made visible. Not in a way the dreams are made visible, because you're the only audience to your own dream, but the unseen is made visible, and the unseen is pretty terrifying. And empiricism denies it, yet folk and peasantry and the uneducated classes and people who go to movies about witches all know there's something going on. It's like you can't quite hear the music, but there's a vibration in the air. And it's unutterably thrilling because it's also forbidden knowledge. It's been prescribed for generations, particularly in so-called Christian countries. It is very, very interesting. Then you get the house they live in. In Sabrina, what a conjunction of events. It's got its own graveyard. There's a full-scale autopsy room downstairs run by a gay vampire.
He was wonderful.
Yes.
I think he's just been nominated for a BAFTA.
Well, he's British.
Yes, of course.
As
what is You mentioned the Book of Spells, Grimoire.
The grimoire.
Sabrina, I think one could be. I think some audiences have found Sabrina a little thin on practice, and I think you don't see her wanting to learn anything. It's almost as if because she comes from some sort of aristocratic, rather unusual combination of mom and dad, these things will be by a process of osmosis known to her. And I think the problem for many younger viewers, or not for viewers, is the Harry Potter franchise, where Harry is shown in many, however many there were, 6 or 7 movies, and of course the books, learning to be a very powerful person wielding magic in the various, and he developed and he grew. We don't, Sabrina seems to have it, but it hasn't been unlocked yet. And that is interestingly related to the Harkness novels,
Yes.
where you have it all there, particularly with mixed parentage, and something has to precipitate this influx of power. And of course, I think that marvelous ending of season 1, where she does sign her name. She signed herself over to the Lord of Darkness, and suddenly she's peroxide blonde, and she no longer wears those sweet little jumpers and things.
That's excellent. You've just raised one of the big differences between Harry Potter magic and Hermione, say, and Sabrina, is that Sabrina has a historic understanding of her powers because she's got one witch parent and one straight parent, if that's the word. But it's only by making an irrevocable choice or a commitment that she's able to access the other side with consequences.
Yes. And of course, one doesn't get a sense it's not the same as Harry Potter.
No.
Because Harry Potter's Hogwarts is good writ large, and the Dementors and Voldemort are the Dark Lord. Here, that's what I think makes it interesting.
Well, it's what makes it not children's literature for the first time, witches that aren't children's literature.
Yes.
That is what is surprising about Sabrina, is that it locks into adult understandings and imaginations.
And the 2 big questions. Under what circumstances do you wield power? And how is freedom compromised, if at all?
Well, it can be compromised because you get it illicitly.
Yes. And of course the hedonism associated with the Dark Lord and the Dark Forces, which I think are well demonstrated and expressed.
Yes. And the capacity that if you've made the decision and you're a teenager, you're a teenage witch, which means that, as in the case of some of the other junior witches, you can be as nasty as all get out. You're licensed to be absolutely terrifyingly awful. I think what is interesting to me about Sabrina, particularly, and to a lesser degree about the sexual awakenings of the quaint blue-eyed boy who lives in his mom's attic in the sex education one, and the busting out desires of the teenage girls who are fighting against Catholicism of a particularly oppressive sort because it's tied into nationalism and the presence of the military. It is a deeply oppressive environment that the dirty girls are operating in. The only levity is the person who shouldn't be levit at all, which is the headmistress.
Yes. A wonderful performance.
A wonderful performance and a great script. Her script was outstanding. The other girls aren't interesting. In fact, it's a bit of an effort to draw a distinction between them. They're a sort of amalgam of each other as they bobble along. There's some attempt to make them into individuals. One is a lesbian coming out of the lesbian closet. One is stuck on a boy and won't let him see it. You know, the usual sort of tropes of late teenagerhood. Vexed, of course, is that the oldest teenager is actually 31 and there's not one who's in her teens.
Why is this the case? Why are there very few shows, unless it's a child who's playing a 9-year-old? You can hardly have a 20-year-old playing a 9-year-old. But once you get to 15, 16, clearly one can present as a 15, 16-year-old. Is that?
I have an answer.
Yes, I'm glad you always do.
Yeah, but it might be wrong this time. It's because at the end of in high school or at the end of high school, in each examples, they're at a stage of transition. And I don't mean transition in terms of career, I'm talking about transition in terms of maturity.
Yeah.
And they are about to become granted the title of adult. And what greater indicator is there of being an adult than having sexual freedom or even sexual access? So in each case, there's a form of sexuality that is about to be liberated. It is made mysterious and far more real in Sabrina, because sex is seen as the stand-in for power, and she gets real power. The sex is just a spin-off. It's not the main goal. For the other two groups of elderly children, it's the main goal. How can we become sexually active in the 8th bedroom with a Hungarian or a Ukrainian victim of Chernobyl?
That Russian cameo role was delightful. And that was an outside eye. In the same way as, of course, the boy is that English boy who doesn't eat greasy chips.
I'm not gay.
No. Ambrose was far more interesting.
I'd like to talk about the presentation of what headmasters we saw. We saw 3 headmaster types.
Oh, yes.
In Sabrina, the headmaster type is actually the devil, or can be the devil when summoned. He has terrifying potencies and, of course, terrifying weaknesses. They're presented as 2 sides of the same coin. Then there's Mr. Goff.
Mr. Goff. Well, actually, may I just pause on Mr. Goff?
Please do.
It's something that Mr. Goff somehow just morphs into my... For the first 5 or 10 minutes of the first episode, season 1, where there's only 1 season of sex education, I really expected a song and dance routine right there in the forecourt, as it were. It's like something out of Grease, and a kind of new version of John Travolta, and perhaps Maeve as the rebellious Olivia Newton-John coming out and doing, in La La Land, the opening scene will be the contemporary version. But at the end of all of this, Mr. Goff would appear on a little balcony on the 2nd floor. It had that feel. And the point I'm making about Mr. Goff is straight out of a kind of Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
But he's also opera buffer.
Yes, he is. As is his curious son.
Yes. Well, his curious son is a zany.
Yes.
But the headmasters, your point, is an excellent one. Mr. Goff, you might remember, actually does have a song and dance routine on his own.
Oh, he does?
Yes, he dances away with himself in a corridor.
Yes,
for
that's
reasons
right.
completely unknown or never explained.
Actually, one of the highlights for me of the entire season 1, Mr. Goff's dance. Because it was...
the dance of Goff.
Yes, a Goff dance. It was unexpected. And that says a great deal. It was the only unexpected thing.
I bet you it was an outtake they chose to leave in.
Maybe he was so bored he just had to do a little twirl.
Oh, how could he not be bored? How could he not be bored?
I think of the 3, the medal has to go to, of our immaculate medal has to go to the headmistress in the Dairy Girls.
Sister Michael.
Sister Michael. Oh. She was worth watching season 1.
She was the highlight of that show. I was always waiting for her to come along and to have a religiously correct, completely subversive statement about everything.
Yes.
My best one is when there's that talent show and they're singing badly. He says, yes, we must be grateful to God for the talent that was given to the original recorders for this.
Yes. I think on that note, I think we should perhaps close. Do you have anything further to say?
Not really.
No, I think that's about what we can say.
Thank you, Zoe. Enlightening as always.
Thank you, David.